Welcome back to Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher. With me today, with me always, is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Steven.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Folks, today, I know if you're at all keeping up with the news, the craziness just keeps getting crazier, man. And as I believe Terrence McKenna said, right, it's just going to get weirder and weirder. That man prophesized the future. And I think that is just becoming more and more true as we pass forward. And I know the news is dark. I know the news is crazy. It seems like, the worst aspects of the leadership across the world are taking place, right? And, they're doing the most demonic, evil things you could think of. I don't want to make that the entire crux of the episode. What we're actually going to do is reflect that inward, right? When we see all these things happening in the scope of the world, what Adam and I stressed about before coming on is that it's important, but at the exact same time, it's not, right? And it's kind of the multiple truths that we talk about, and what's more important than, what the evil people running the world are doing? It's the inner work, right? The inner work is the only thing that is going to change the outer experience. And Adam, you said that before we hopped on, bro, and I really love that. So I think it's worth repeating. The inner work is the only thing that is going to change the outer experience. So while the outer world, right, the news, whatever is going on, is going to stir up some feelings, right? Outrage, anger. And it's not like they shouldn't, like they should. But once again, what do we have control over? It's just ourselves, y'all. It's just ourselves.
Yeah.
And controlling, our perspective, our mind, how we view the world, and especially more than anything, not living in fear and living in love. I know Bad Bunny said that, right, recently, which was, again, another, he said love is more powerful than hate. And I love that. But it was, again, just to use him. I'm like, that's also a distraction, like who's singing at the Super Bowl? It's like that shit, like, it matters, but again, it doesn't. Like, again, it really doesn't. I think it's just another thing to divide people, of like, oh, that's not American. I'm like, Puerto Rico is an American territory. Like he is an American citizen, you know.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's just a distraction for people. Adam, those are my opening thoughts on this topic, man. So yeah, what are your thoughts on, nothing matters, it's all perfect. The real work lies
Mm.
within, brother.
Yeah, man. Well, I guess it comes down to, again, another thing we talk about a lot, that right and wrong are not absolute terms, right? Those things change over time and space. So recognizing that right and wrong really comes down to a choice of how we want to express ourselves, what we want to define as right and wrong individually and collectively in order to create the experience that we want to have. Now we are being exposed on a much larger scale to some of the ways that the world has been run, which has been obvious to many of us for a long time, but a lot of more of the general population is catching up to that awareness now with all this information being released. And so we come to another point, as we do all the time, really, in every moment, where we get to choose what is right and what is wrong. And I think most of us are recognizing that we would like to choose for that which is coming out in the news to be considered wrong, because that feels right to consider that wrong. But in order to do that, in order to really do that, we have to look at how we have all contributed to this, how we have all turned a blind eye to it. Like, as I was mentioning before we hopping on, I personally come into, the awareness of how that's all been running, in the last 6, 8 years, and talked about it with people, and, got kind of shouted down. And 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 recognizing that I used to be that person, even longer time ago, that would shout down conspiracy theories and things like that. But recognizing that if we want to make those changes, if we want to define for our global community a new uh, a new definition of right and wrong, doing away with the way that things have been carrying on behind the scenes, then we have to do the inner work. We have to recognize that it's not us versus them. Okay, yeah, we're all angry. Those people are doing it wrong. Yes, but also, so like yes, but also no, but also recognize that we all contribute to this. And that again, if we want to make a change in the outer experience, we have to change our inner landscape. Does that make sense, or was that too all over the place?
Of course it does. Of course it does. And I see what we talked about before hopping on, brother. It's like, again, I see outrage online, or talking to people, like, like, isn't this crazy? And it's like, yeah, of course, but we're not at the point where people are taking to the streets demanding a change. Like, we're just not there
Yeah,
yet. And so it's like, in the interim of, like, maybe there's a boiling point where, like, this stuff just keeps coming out, and it just reaches the boiling point, but we're not there yet. And so until we're at that point, it's like, what's the work that we can do within ourselves,
yeah,
right? And especially within neighbors, communities, like, it's like, within families, man. Like, it's like, I've talked to people, and the stuff that's happened to them when it comes to, like, assault, when they were children. It's like, it was like family members, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, you
yeah,
think it's like attacking the highest echelons of society. It's like, yes, of course they're doing something wrong and disgusting, but it's everywhere as well, and especially in your immediate vicinity. So it's like, there's things that we can be doing. And again, especially internally. And when you're doing the work, I feel like inside, my discernment and intuition for people, like, is sharper, recognizing how people make me feel. And I'm like, oh, I got a weird feeling from that person that I didn't like. So it's like, okay, like, would I let children that I know in my life around that person? It's like, hell no.
yeah,
It's just like listening and trusting myself, like, as I continue to work on myself. Is
yeah,
just, I guess, the only thing that I would add to that point.
yeah. It's really important. That's really important to be able to do that because, yeah, ultimately, we have all been turning a blind eye to this. I mean, it's a collective experience. We have to understand that it's not an us versus them. There is no separation. Separation is the ultimate illusion here. We are all responsible for this, and like, so that's the thing. Like, if are we upset enough? Kind of like what you're just saying. Like, are we getting to that point? Have we gotten to that point of being upset enough that we will actually do something about this? Because as far as I can see, actually doing something about it is not projecting it outward, but turning it around and looking inward and seeing, again, how have we all been responsible for this? Why has it, just for as a quick example, why over the last, I don't know how long, over the last couple generations, why has it all of a sudden become normal for and expected for grown women to have no body hair? There's like one example of like how we have this sort of pedophilia culture. Why did we move to that as being like a cultural norm? Because it's bizarre. If you look at it from just a biological standpoint, why did we move in that direction? Why are we infantilizing everything? Why are we we've been sexualizing children for how long? It's something that we have all taken part in, and like as far as lending our energy at least. So the example that you're using there of like, hey, if your intuition is telling you this person's creepy, I'm not going to let my kids around them. How many people in the past have not done that because they didn't want to rock the boat in the family? Hey, maybe Uncle John over there is a little creepy, but we don't want to create a scene by saying like, "Oh no, the kids can't go hang out with him," because people are more concerned about, not upsetting someone, not rocking the boat, and it's that kind of shit, not listening to your intuition, that led to some kids getting molested. That kind of thing, right? Like, where we have to be able to step outside of our fear-based ego thinking and speak our truths and live our truths, because that's where we have to operate from if we want to make any change. Operating from the ego and just pattern recognition, trying to stay safe, survival mechanism, trying to not upset anybody, that goes in directly against, in most cases in this screwed up world, it goes against the pull of our intuition, what our hearts are trying to tell us to do. It's like making that radical choice to operate from the heart space rather than rather than the fear-based mind, and recognizing that, like, that's what's we all need to do individually. It's like no one can sit back and be like, "Okay, well, I'm good." I'm like, here's an example outside of me that is like objectively, and meaning objectively, just like more so collectively, most people would agree that is like horrific and terrible. And of course, like I agree. But just because that's so bad and it's outside of me, it does not excuse me from looking at the tiny little things that still need to be looked at inside of me, right? Like I still have little bits of shadow. Just because that shadow is so much darker and it's outside, it's the elites, it's all these big names in the newspaper coming out. That doesn't mean that I don't still have to look at the tiny bits of shadow inside of me, because if I don't, then I'm just going to continue contributing to that thing. And again, this is where people get lost a little bit sometimes, is because being so programmed in this illusion of separation, we don't think that there's like that connection. So many people don't see the connection and don't see that we are all responsible for it. But the truth is we are. So if you really are disgusted by what's coming out in the news, if you're really upset by it and you really care, then turn the focus inward. Yes, of course, share your opinions with your family and talk about it, but like with my opinion, my advice here is like with the focus, with the direction of always bringing the conversation back to how are we all responsible for this, because it's a collective problem. It's not an us versus them thing.
Yeah, man. It's when you talking about that, it's like growing up, I remember instances in my mind where maybe kids told parents where it's like, of hey, I don't get a good feeling around this person, or
Yeah.
whatever, and then the parents don't listen.
Yeah,
And,
because
and
it's
so it's like,
rude.
because it's rude, or yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, like you don't want to make a scene. And, I have examples within my life. I'm not going to say any names or whatever, but it's like, yeah, like men in the family going after those people while they were kids, man. And then them trying to tell their parents and then them not believing them, brother. So it's like,
Wow.
this stuff is around us. It's like, yeah, it's in the upper echelons, but it's around us too. It's in friends, it's in families, and someone really close to me. I know she has kids, and she's, I think she had awful experiences when she was young because like she's very careful of who she lets around her kids.
Mm.
Where I'm like, okay, like that's, it's sad in a lot of ways because it's like you want to trust the village. People say it takes a village, right, to raise children, and it does. But sometimes there's, people in the village that have no business being around the rest. We like to point the finger and we like to judge from the sidelines, but it's around us too, bro. Like it's around us too.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've witnessed it growing up. I have an instance where I was talking to one of my nephews, and he got a bad feeling about not a person, but like a place. And he was like, he didn't
Mm.
like it. And I was like, oh, all right, dude, like, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, let's get out of here. Like, I'll trust
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what made you feel bad, or what made you,
Yeah.
or what about the energy of the place you didn't like, but it's like, I'll trust your intuition. You know what I mean? If that's
Yeah.
picking up something that I might have missed, you know?
Yeah.
And, so that's just an example again, bro. Yeah. Of like, yeah, just listening, right? Listening.
Yeah. And that's a great one, man. I really like that too. And even if to the casual observer, on the surface, there was nothing dangerous at that place. What you did there is like foster the trust in his own intuition, right? So he got better at listening to that, and it's like, oh, somebody that I respect and feel safe around validated me. Then maybe he'll trust that even more in the future, and it's when he's in a situation where it is a little bit more risky. And so that's a beautiful thing. And another thing is like another way that we can bring it to the personal level, especially as men, is having those conversations with your buddies. You see somebody, like maybe a friend or a friend of a friend, it's like, it's not to judge, but like create the conversations at least to draw the awareness. You see somebody, you see one of the guys in the circle hitting on or talking about a woman who's like way too young. Just start the conversation. Just like, what's up with that? Like we gotta hold each other accountable, and it has to be known. Like for some people who are earlier on that path and maybe have some unprocessed trauma and unrecognized trauma, maybe in a case like that, it's like, hey man, that's actually not acceptable, and here's why, and maybe you need to talk to somebody about that kind of thing, because it's those things that we've also turned a blind eye on, where, nobody's talked about that because they don't want to rock the boat. It's just another example. Instances and examples of ways in which we can do our work to remedy the situation that is being experienced, on the entire collective scale of this entire planet. Because as we're seeing with the stuff in the news, it's everywhere. All of the upper echelons, as you say, it's all everybody's involved in it.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, and again, like you said, those are examples of like where it's like, okay, yeah, like it's not illegal, but is it like again, like laws have been fucked up for a long time. Like at one point,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just because something's not illegal doesn't mean it's
yeah,
okay, right? It's like, at one
yeah,
point, slavery and, all this crazy shit was legal at one point too. You know what I mean? Did that make
yeah,
it ever right or okay? Absolutely not. So like
yeah,
it's like just because, yeah, bro, like how many times you see a dude in his 30s talking like, maybe a 19 or a 20-year-old, it's
yeah,
like what are you
yeah,
doing, brother? Like the
yeah,
the difference in that age gap. And it's like, why are you doing that?
yeah,
Because what is it
exactly.
like, they're more easy to control. It's more easy for you to be predator in some
Yeah,
ways of just like, manipulating this poor girl or whatever the case may be.
yeah,
And absolutely, man, it's like we're all responsible for this stuff and
yeah,
like letting this stuff slide. We're all complicit, man. It's time we open up that conversation again. Like I said, I'm really glad we're talking about this, brother, because it's like from what I'm seeing from the world, it's like, yeah, everyone's talking about this and everyone should be outraged. And it's like, absolutely. But no one's pointing the finger at us, like ourselves, right? It's just like the societal collective.
exactly.
And like you said, brother, like all the things that we're endorsing, in the media or yeah, brother, like watch, when it's like kids, like, when it's like they grow up, when it's like 12, 13, it's like they grow up so fast. And it's like, whether it's like the clothing or the makeup or whatever. And it's like, no, like
Yeah,
hold on to being a kid, right? Like you guys are still
yeah.
young, and so it's like, but it's like almost like the culture has endorsed, um,
Oh, yeah,
people to grow up, but like you see in like Japan's kind of flipped where it's like they try to hold on to their youth for like as
mm,
long as possible, like culturally, right? It's like I forget the word for it. There's like some word for it in Japanese, but it's kind of like yeah, holding on to like that child, like like
mm,
being into the toy, like cool animes or toys or whatever the case is, right? It's like they're not trying to like grow up too fast, right? Where it's like I feel like here or like in the Western world, it's like kids want to be adults like as soon as they possibly can, which is like a
yeah.
weird cultural thing I don't understand.
Well, I mean, from that perspective, that our entire culture is underpinned by fucking pedophilia, it makes sense that people that energy, that collective energy has been pushing them toward acting like adults and making it okay for these grown men to be hitting on teenagers or even worse. And then the other side of it that I've seen, which has evolved, or which has grown out of the sort of, sort of like woke culture, cancel culture kind of energy, is people trying to legitimize it, is people trying to getting a little distorted in the idea of what right and wrong means, and maybe lost in the idea that those are absolute terms, and that has resulted in, as I think I mentioned to you before, this maps idea. And I remember hearing this a few years ago, and I was like, maps, what the fuck is that? Stands for minor attracted persons. And I was like, okay. And this was like a friend who was explaining this to me, who was a therapist, and was like, "Yeah, there are people who are trying to turn that into a legitimate sexual orientation and find compassion and allow these people a space." And I'm like, "Okay, that's, going probably a little too far, because there's understanding, like." So my opinion, just throw my opinion and perspective in here, is like, if someone has been traumatized because they have been molested as a child, and then they grow up, and then they have that trauma is expressing by now they are an adult, and they are finding themselves in the mindset of an offender. Absolutely having compassion for the human being who is going through that experience. right? And offering them the support, and also, like offering them the support that they need to heal, to move away from that, to expel that darkness from their being, and get rid of it. But in absolutely no way on a societal or like systemic level creating a supportive space for them to express that, because that is actually how far some people think they want to take it. It's like, support and have compassion for the people who are in that, but do not support the behavior. Absolutely. And then again, recognizing, like, as I share that opinion, that is just my opinion. That is because, while for my personal experience, what I choose to create, I am going to say that, yeah, uh, being attracted to minors is not okay, because that's the world that I choose to create. That's the world that I choose to experience. But at the same time, I recognize that no matter what we talk about, right and wrong are not absolute terms. Nothing in the realm of the absolute is right or wrong. There is no such thing. Polarity doesn't exist. This is just an element of our experience here, because we can look to our past. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it was very normal for people to engage in what we now consider homosexual behavior, and they would not label themselves that way. People would engage in, child, like, dude, I took this course. I think I mentioned before. I took this course in university. It was like a history of sexuality. It was fascinating, like really, really eye opening. Like, what people would engage in, what people who considered themselves to be straight laced, totally normal, like family man kind of energy, what they would engage in when they go downtown to visit, various different types of sex workers back in the day, was pretty wild. And then they would not consider themselves out of the ordinary. So recognizing that, and then, yeah, as we've also discussed, both Stephen and I having friends who were combat veterans returning from Afghanistan, telling stories about how they run things in Afghanistan. Men dating little boys as very commonplace, and so we can see that, like, culturally, the right and wrong thing, it's not absolute. It doesn't apply. What we consider right and wrong, maybe in North America, is not going to be considered right or wrong in Asia, for example, or the Middle East. And so right and wrong changes not only geographically, but also with time. Again, we've all heard the stories of, like, ancient Greece and Rome. People engaging in sexual acts with children was, a pretty normal, commonplace thing. So I guess, and at the same time, I guess we're coming to find out on a large scale that has just never changed, that the elites have been engaging in that the entire time. But I think for the most of us, like the rest of us, we've generally considered that to be wrong. The kind of fucked up part is that it was, like, going on the entire time. Anyway, back to the point of, like, right and wrong is not, those are not absolute terms. They change over time, they change over space. Obviously those things are related. And so it really comes down to not, like, this is right or that's wrong. It's just, what do I want to choose to create? I personally want to choose to create and experience a world where people are not engaging in sexual acts with children, people who are not abusing children. So that's what I want. That's why I'm going to say something like, uh, you know, defining a group as a minor attracted persons in order to facilitate their experience, not facilitate, but to legitimize their experience in the eyes of the community, and not see it as a problem. That is something that I personally disagree with, and that I am all against. At the same time, holding the paradox for some. I mean, it seems clear to me that the people who are involved in that and are seeking help deserve our compassion, because they are human beings and they're only in that boat because they've been traumatized in the first place. And if they're seeking help to not be a part of that, that is actually doing the real work to dispel that energy from this planet. Because if we just lock it away, pretend that it's not happening, get angry at it, say it's not in our families, that's the experience. That is the actual lived experience of turning the blind eye, of, like, pretending it's not there, and, like, we're just too uncomfortable to talk about it. That's the, like, oh yeah, let's not talk about the fact that, Uncle Jimmy over there is kinda creepy. Let's not talk about the fact that obviously the elites on this planet have been doing this for a long time. It's been really obvious to me for several years now. It's like if we don't do that work, then we're continuing this cycle. If we just push it underground, then we're just continuing it. It's like we're chasing our tails here. We're going in loops karmically because we're not recognizing that it is all of our work to do to look at that and to go inward and see where we're
Yeah, man. You bring up a really interesting point, right? And, I'm of the belief where it's like, what's the most, again, my opinion, right? Like, what's the most evil thing you can do is, yeah, like exert your power over the innocence of a child, right? But
I
like you
don't agree.
said, like supposedly it's just fucking been a part of humanity for long ass time, man. And like you said, it hasn't gone away. So it's like
Mhm.
for us to change that, we all got to talk about it. Cause brother, exactly like that, that was the case in my personal life, seeing it around, impacted by people or, yeah, creepy Uncle Jimmy or whatever the fuck. It's like the adults nearby don't want to talk about it, address it, especially with like, I don't know what it was with like, and again, I don't want to like always just be knocking on the older generations, but something about that was just like yeah, they didn't want to hear about it, talk about it,
Yeah.
address it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like sweep it under the rug. That's what the work we're trying to change, right? To bring it up and, fix it. Because yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that time
Can
and
I
time again of just, yes, go for it.
Y Can I ask just something real quick? Is there's like I think they didn't wanna talk about it because they were already so fucking traumatized by other shit in their lives that they couldn't handle anything extra. They're going through wars, they're going through famines, they're going through depressions. It's like, I think they just had too much, and systemically, if you wanna look from a big perspective, it's like they couldn't handle more, and that's why they overlooked shit like that. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there and wanna steal the floor from you.
No, bro,
Totally
absolutely.
the
Brother, again, growing up in Boston, right? And like y'all remember, I brought this up before, but it's like I grew up in the Catholic Church. And where did all the Catholic pedophilia come to light? Where did that start? Even though it was rampant worldwide. And this was in
Yeah.
2001. And
Mm.
Bill Burr has this great bit where he's just like, they just shuffled around the Catholic priests like they were the fucking killer whales that killed a trainer at SeaWorld, right? Like they just
Mhm.
shuffle them to a different church, and again, the dark humor making me laugh, because again,
Yeah.
we talked about that in a different episode because it's like it's so
Yeah.
fucking true,
Yeah.
and so like yeah, there was never really a reckoning with that, and like yeah, maybe some people are because again, the organization had such power. I remember the Boston Globe was even like uncertain about going against it because of how powerful the Catholic Church was, especially in Boston, because they were
Yeah.
like, we're going against, say this goes to a lawsuit, like we're going against Catholic judges, in Boston.
Yeah.
And so it's like, who are the Catholic judges getting, like, you're going up against, the entire fucking system when you try to reckon
Yeah.
with the behavior that people are doing and the behavior that people are performing. And again, it was like it was normalized, which is crazy, and it's protected. So there's this whole apparatus of like lawyers and people protecting this behavior, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's been here, y'all. It's been here,
Yeah. And it's recognizing like somebody doesn't wanna it's the micro macro, right? It's like the way that was playing out in like, um, the citywide experience there. You're talking about the Boston Globe and the Catholic Church in your city, as well as as on the planetary level, because it's everywhere. It's the micro macro with the family, right? It's like so somebody doesn't want to speak out. They don't want to run a news story from their they don't want to run a story in their newspaper because they're ultimately, what does it come down to? They're afraid of losing their meal ticket. They're afraid they're going to get fired and then they're not going to be able to put food on the table for their family. And it's the same thing in a family unit. It's like nobody wants to call out creepy Uncle Jimmy because they don't want grandma and grandpa to get mad at them and not invite them to Thanksgiving and create drama in the family and everybody hate them. And it's like, because again, it comes down to this fear-based way of looking at things, ego perception of our reality, of 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 fear, of not wanting to be cast out of the group, of wanting to remain because that's where safety is. But when we drop out of our minds and into our hearts and recognize that we are not our minds, we are not just our physical expression, this one life is not the most important thing, the journey and evolution of our soul is the most important thing, then we can easily refocus our awareness and our priorities on what matters, and say like, no, 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 speaking out about against this kind of thing is more important, even if I do get cast out, even if I do get heckled, like, and recognizing that's how truth always begins. In my own personal experience, and I was talking about this 6 years ago to people that I knew, and they were laughing at me, not to make it about myself, but no, I can share my personal experience because that's the experience I know the best. So it's not that it's about my story, but like that was my personal experience. And I know tons of people, the people who helped me see this like 6, 7, 8 years ago. Before that, like, they were talking about this 20 years ago, and people were thinking they're crazy. Like, oh yeah, all the politicians and all the movie stars are all, trafficking children. That people thought that was insane. That was a crazy conspiracy theory just a few years ago. And like now it's accepted as truth. So anyway, just like remembering that if we drop out of the awareness, if we can have the courage to like own the truth within ourselves, we can drop out of the ego awareness and into the heart and recognize like, man, if we got to make a change, like, then we have to own that awareness that we are more than our egos, and that, interestingly, once we do start to operate from that space, all that stuff that we used to be afraid of, that we are no longer afraid of, ultimately ends up taking care of itself anyway, which is really beautiful because we just align with the flow of energy, which is actually loving. Underneath all of this insanity is actually loving. That is like the distortion and the depravity that has grown out of our distorted free will choices is just that. It's just a result of our choices. It's a cause and effect. So that's, again, seeing that we are all responsible, bringing it back to the responsibility for making it better by like just operating from a loving place. And yeah, I agree with you. Seeing that, like, my personal belief too is that loving and supporting and protecting children is a really great way of expressing love.
I met a really cool person recently, and they work a lot with children and like doing really great work, right? Like, feeding them school materials, all the stuff that should be provided for, right? Doing all that really cool work. And they talk about like safe adults. So like they'll ask the children, be like, think of people in your life like who make you feel safe, like who you feel safe around, who you can trust. And, a lot of the kids would be like, oh, it's my grandmother, it's my mom, it's my dad. And, unfortunately, some of the kids, they're like, I don't have anybody, and so like they become that safe adult for that child, that safe space for them to go to, right? And like you said, bro, like just like the love and the protecting, and it's like you know, I would consider us, strong, healthy men, right? And with, like I said, with like my nieces and nephews, with my family, or like, those kids, it's like protecting that from the people that would do it harm to it, right? And there was this interesting anecdote, which where like a guy, like they were interviewing some creep, right? Who's convicted or whatever, and he was like, what would you look for in like a victim? And he was like, any family with like strong fathers, he would stay away from, you know? And like I just found that really interesting because it's like, okay, like, yeah, like, but like makes sense, right? Like, so it's like obviously he didn't want the potential for violence to come into play for
Yeah.
him to like, satisfy whatever he was trying to, whatever's, the sickness that he was trying to deal with, right? And so again, like if we're just again doing the work on ourselves, like becoming the best versions of ourselves, strong, healthy, men and women fit, you know what I mean? Just like and like protecting um our energy and the energy of like the children in our communities, I think it just lends to itself, right? And becoming those like safe spaces for these kids. Um 'Cause yeah, man, it's like, goddamn, it's rampant everywhere, and I think it's needed. It's needed, right? It's needed. I don't think. I mean, like you said, like we had an idea that this has always been needed, but I think the society at large is waking up to the fact that wow, like this
Yeah.
is way more needed. This energy, this cultivation of this like philosophy of when it comes to the children in our world, of
Yeah.
like what that needs to look like, moving forward.
Absolutely, man. And like there's so many ways to do that, for us to do that work, and for everybody to be like, how do we do that? How do we be safer spaces for kids? And when you shared the little anecdote there of the guys, like, they're asking like, what's the sort of families you would stay away from. Like, so he's saying strong fathers, and it makes me think of like another. I think I was in psych class in university. Okay, interviewing violent offenders that were, you know, locked up in prisons, and they would show them videos of different people walking, and they would say like, who would you mug first out of these people? And, you know, it's like whoever had the more positive, sorry, not positive, but like confident sort of stride, not walking too fast, not walking too slow, but just moving confidently. It's like that, you know, I'm not gonna try and rob that guy. You know, but the person who's looking a little like, you know, hunched over and nervous and moving too fast, like that's easy prey, right? Because you're thinking about that from trying to get in these guys' perspective, like they're just looking for like they're looking at everything from the perspective of like a cost benefit analysis, right? Like what's gonna be the easiest prey for me? What's gonna be the easiest way? Thinking about that from this guy who's talking about what sort of children he would prey on. It's like who is gonna be coming from the family that doesn't have a strong father? It's like, well, like the families that have addictions, the families that are split up, right? Like, the kids that are engaging in these addictive behaviors that are getting into these vulnerable situations are probably
Yeah.
coming from families where that's been modeled to them. So if people are asking like, well, you know, I don't have anything like any of that like like really profound darkness in my family or in myself, like how can I help? It's like again, we can always look to improving ourselves, to bettering ourselves, looking at our own addictions, you know, like, oh, maybe, you know, like you can be a safer place for your kids or your nieces and nephews if you're not drinking a bunch of beers every day. Like if you're just a more present and grounded person, even if you're not like a dangerous person, you can still become a safer person. You can still become a more whole and centered and clear-sighted version of yourself by, you know, putting down the alcohol, the cannabis, the cigarettes, whatever it is, the tobacco, whatever it is, you know, like we can all do that work to be better versions of ourselves, to bring more light through ourselves in order to illuminate more of the darkness that's on this planet. Because again, it's all a collective issue.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting where it's like the strength that we cultivate within ourselves deters threats from
Yeah.
coming into my life or coming into our lives. You know, it's really interesting. And again, it's not like you're immune to bad things happening to you, but like just the strength that you cultivate within yourself is a deterrent for those
Yep.
forces, right? You know, for the people that are, you know, are traumatized or are looking to, you know, commit violence or are looking to perpetuate the behaviors that they might have fallen victim to, right?
Yeah.
And so really interesting where it's like that stuff that we cultivate within ourselves, that strength, that safety that we create for ourselves and then extend into the, the innocence within our lives or, our family members or friends, like our energy is infectious too, right? And it
Yeah.
impacts the people around us. And
Yeah.
pretty cool in a way that it's, to kind of, I know we heavy topic, y'all, heavy episode today. So it's like, kind of on a lighter note where it's just like that energy that we create within ourselves is a deterrent for
Yeah.
those darker forces that are taking place throughout society.
Yeah, dude, you put it so well. That's perfect. You're explaining the metaphysics of it, and it's just the same thing as you can't pour from an empty cup. It's like, well, when you have a full and overflowing cup, then it overflows to everyone else. And so it's like, yeah, if you want to be strong for the world, if you want to be strong for the children, then be strong for yourself. First and foremost, again, don't just sit there in your living room with your beer. You know, it sounds a little judgmental, but fuck it, whatever. It's been my experience, and this is my family's. Don't just sit there in your living room with your beer, like, saying like, "Oh, it's those bad ones out there." Like, looking at the TV, like, I can't believe they've done this, and like, blah, blah, blah. It's them, it's them, it's them. It's like, no, it's you too. It's all of us. So like, put down that beer and have a look and see where this has impacted you, how you have potentially unconsciously been a part of this too. Like we were mentioning those examples earlier, like turning a blind eye to something kinda questionable your buddy says, turning a blind eye to that creepy family member, like, shouting down the people who were trying to talk about this years ago, like, "Hey, guys, we were trying to talk about this like, lots of people were trying to talk about this 50 years ago. People have been laughing them down ever since, the entire time, I should say. And, like, just recognize how we've all been complicit and how we can all do better, 'Cause that's great. I love how you put that, man.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, it's not all I don't again, the quote I always go back to, right? It's like pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. It's like do not let the fucked up nature of all this information get you down. Like use it
Yeah,
as a catalyst to change and to improve and to get better and be strong, right? Be strong of mind, be strong of body, be strong of spirit because that's how things change, and yeah, man. Yeah, and it's a deterrent, right? It's like we talked about. It's a deterrent for those
yeah,
evil things that are out there that are looking, right? And so, don't be an easy target for those forces to come, be strong for the people around you, for yourself, for each other, right? For these people, right? We talk about find the others, right? Find the other people that are trying to do good in this world, right? Because
yeah,
couple drops makes a puddle, bunch of puddles makes a pond, bunch of ponds, you create a wave,
yeah,
right? And create some
yeah,
change. So, keep finding these other people that are trying to create change in the world and you will. But yeah, brother, I think that's probably a pretty solid place to wrap up episode 31. Any closing thoughts on this heavy topic, y'all? I know it's a heavy topic, right? I know it's heavy,
yeah.
but yeah, Adam, any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, just like holding all of that, what we said, and also, yeah, just deepening that awareness that anything and everything can be a distraction from that work. So sitting there and just thinking it's outside of us is, the ultimate spiritual warfare, I believe, is like just distracting us from going inwards. So no matter what it is that's in the news, absolutely hold all the space for it and the energy for it, but focus always inward, as has been the message of this episode, and know that it's going to get even crazier. Hold the possibility, hold the awareness that maybe, this coming out in the news might be the least crazy thing we hear in the next 3 years. Like this might pale in
Yeah.
comparison to what's coming next. So
Yeah.
so don't get lost in being pulled into the news story. Of course, it's something that we need to process and look at our collective shadow and our individual shadows, and like that work needs to be done. Don't bypass it. Absolutely go into it, but also, don't let it, as you said, don't let it drown you. Be aware that there's more craziness coming. Like this is a very distorted experience that we have here. This human experience, it's very topsy-turvy, so, just stay centered. Like, always come back into the intuition. There could be a lot of opposing, paradoxical information coming in, and remember to always, filter it through the ego, absolutely, the process of discernment, but always coming also to the intuition, because that's where we're gonna find our deepest truths. So, that's all I would say.
So if you like what you heard, please engage with us, share, comment, subscribe, all the things that are free, that really, really helps us out a lot. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll catch you next time, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to Oneself, and we'll see you next week.